Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is Wednesday, February 18th, 2026 at 1:05 in the afternoon. So we're back to discuss our budget, FY27 budget. So we didn't get to Commissioner Pelham last week, so we've invited her back, and Commissioner Jetson is back also to just chat about grants. So I think we'll start with Commissioner Pelham. Heather, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. For the record, Commissioner Heather Pelham, Department of Tourism and Marketing, and I do apologize for not being there in person today, but I am under the weather and don't want to pass that around. So thank you for
Sorry that we
that.
have to have you come in when you're not feeling well.
Oh, well, I'm happy for the time. So glad to have the remote option, I will say. Did you want me to pull up the slide deck that we had last time we presented, or do you folks have that? I can't actually see you, so I wasn't sure if people already have that up or if I need to share that.
I think if you want to share your screen and go through it, that'd be great.
Okay, let me just give me 1 second then. I guess I'll need access to share the screen.
I said it should pop up in just a second.
Sorry, it's still giving me it's not saying that I have access to share. Okay. Let's see. Okay. How's that?
Good.
Okay, great. So let's starting right here. I think I might have skipped one slide. Department of Tourism and Marketing, we do have a staff of 12. But really, top line, this is what tourism in Vermont and the visitor economy is all about. So this is based on the last economic impact analysis that we were able to do in 2024, where we were able to show that 16 million people actually come to Vermont each year. And that's driving $4.2 billion in visitor spending. I also want to note that I'm using the most conservative figures here. This is just direct spending. That is over all sorts of different categories, certainly is, concentrated in lodging, dining, retail, and so forth. Within the bigger budget packet that you have, there's all sorts of additional information on all the slides that I'm going to present if you want to get more into the details. But top line number, $4.2 billion, which is pretty amazing. And as I've said before, maybe you've heard me say it, that our visitors also do pay taxes. So I affectionately refer to them as temporary taxpayers. Almost $300 million in direct taxes paid by visitors in 2024. So when we think about, what some call the affordability crisis in Vermont, the visitor economy and our guests are really helping to reduce that burden on our Vermont households. That $300 million is over $1,000 per Vermont household that is being paid for by visitors that we'd have to raise elsewhere if we did not have that visitor activity. Also supports over 30,000 jobs in Vermont. These jobs and this economic impact, one of the things that's really kind of unique about the visitor economy is that it is distributed all over the state. And that's about 10% of our workforce. I will also note that these numbers together, that 4.2 billion, adds up to 9% of our state GDP. The average for most states of GDP coming from tourism and visitation activity is 3%. So it just shows how much more we rely on our visitor economy than other states do. And I will note, I can't actually see where I'm just sharing my screen. If folks do have questions, please just interrupt me. If with these, again, I mentioned this is just direct spending. If we were to include indirect spending, so supply chain purchases, or induced spending based on wages that folks receive from working in tourism and hospitality, then the economic impact would rise to almost 7 billion, 6.95. So this is what we're talking about. And then in terms of, what our role is, so I just have 4 slides here, top level in terms of what it is that we do. And maybe I'll just take the moment, take the opportunity, not those 2 words together, to say that we do not have a funding ask this year. As everything I'm going to say, I think many know how important the visitor economy is to the state, but we also recognize that we are in a very difficult budget year, and there are priorities to do with education reform and other housing and so forth, that touch so many things that we understand that the visitor economy is not something we can take for granted. But perhaps this is a year that we're going to have to keep doing what we're doing. And part of what I want to talk about here is I think we're actually doing it really quite well. So destination marketing is the bread and butter of what we do. We're telling Vermont's story through as many different types of tactics and ways we can get that message out as possible. But we also understand that we have to prove that return on investment. So I just have 2 bullet points here about recent studies that we've been able to do to be able to quantify that effectiveness of our advertising campaigns. Again, there's much more detail in the full budget report that you have. But just as an example, we had a campaign in the New York City market this summer that included transit advertising on the Metro North and Long Island Railroad, as well as street level digital kiosks in Brooklyn and Manhattan. We had over 160 screens that were showing our ads. When we were able to do a brand impact study, we found that not only did 50% of the people who were exposed to the ads remembered them, but for those who remembered seeing the ads, we were able to achieve a 30% jump in brand consideration and brand opinion. So asked, would you consider coming to Vermont? There's a 30% jump from people who remembered seeing our ads, and that exceeds the benchmark for travel and tourism ads, which is at 18%. So just one example of how we understand how important it is to quantify the effectiveness of the work that we do. Another, taking a slightly different approach. That first one, like I said, was from our summer campaign. The second was for the winter campaign we ran last year. This was where we looked at the entire campaign, so all the households that were exposed to our ads, and then really trying to dial in on what is the travel increment. So understanding that, yes, people are going to come to Vermont anyway. We understand that. But what's the difference between the people who would have come and the people who came specifically because of our advertising? There's a complicated formula about how we go about doing this, but we look at the total amount of households that we were able to reach. Then we look about the households there who had awareness of our ads. Then we look at the average spending for those people, what they had, and those who actually showed up. So for the winter campaign, this return on investment is based on 145,000 visitors who we know specifically came. And this was from a $538,000 ad campaign. So that's where, based on the average trip spending, we're able to get this return of $574 per visitor, based, per each $1 we spent in ad media, and $43 in tax revenue. Happy to go through the math, but there's a lot of math there. So I just want to kind of just make the point that we do take very seriously our ability to talk about return on ad spend. And I also I thought this was an interesting place to just make the point that, that 145,000 people that we know came last winter specifically because of our ads. Clearly that's a fraction of the total, but we were able to achieve a 3.6% travel increment. That's pretty close to the amount of people who came for the solar eclipse. So, 2025 has not been what 2024 was. 2024, we had the benefit of that bump in visitation because of the eclipse, which was amazing. We didn't have to spend a dime promoting it. We just took it as an opportunity to educate people that Vermont was a great place to see that event. But this shows that, we can bring that level of visitation, maybe not all in one day, but we can bring that level of visitation to the state in other times of year. with our ad programs. Just since I mentioned 24 versus 25, there is a delay in data, which can be frustrating to see exactly where we're at. We won't get 25 data until pretty much this summer, which is why we have to go back a bit. But we all know that 2025 was definitely challenging for us with the situation with Canadian visitation. We're still seeing huge year-over-year declines in travel from Canadian visitors. We have done our best to make sure to continue to put our best foot forward in terms of how we promote and talk about the state. But again, this is a topic I can go into much more detail if needed, but we understand there are some very real constraints for Canadians to feel comfortable coming to the United States. Our approach has been, we've worked with local retailers, anyone who might want to offer a discount to Canadian visitors, to have that available on a landing page on our site that also includes some travel tips and so forth. And we've just been monitoring the situation. Over the summer, it was really hot, so to speak. Lots of concern. But when things died down a little bit in the fall, we did run a digital campaign in Canada that was what we called our numbers campaign. So our ads where we took one stat about the state, like 252 welcoming communities, and then paired that with 100% love for Canada. And so we've really tried to make sure that, when we are showing up in the marketplace, that our Canadian visitors know that we care, but we respect that this may not be the time for them to visit, but we certainly would love to welcome them back when they feel so comfortable to do so. Yeah.
On that campaign, were you able to understand if it drew any Canadians down?
We have some stats, like in terms of visitation of people who looked at those deals and so forth. I don't have the level of, economic impact that we can do on a bigger study. It's really, we're in the long game here when it comes to travel sentiment, which we definitely do keep an eye on. But, we're facing the fact that, over the average for the past couple of years, it's about 24-25% of Canadians normally would travel to the US in a current year. We're down to 15% who would even consider it. So I guess I don't want to underestimate the challenge that we have.
No, I think it's a good idea to at least keep our name there.
Oh, absolutely. Completely agree. We have not once stopped our advertising to the Canadian market. We are still there this winter and so forth. We just we understand that we want to be seen as, the friendly neighbor that we are. That's not hard, but with a very sort of soft sell approach to just respect the feelings. So just going on, just because I know that you don't have too much time this afternoon. Another huge bucket of the work we do, I would put in the category of destination development. So this is really supporting the tourism industry at large. A lot of the projects that are listed here in bullet points, we were able to accomplish through the federal funding that we received coming out of the pandemic. One of the ones that I'm most excited about is the very first one. We were able to complete a destination management strategic plan. And this is something that, we did a ton of public engagement on last winter. We did listening sessions all around the state to really kind of dive into, what is going to help the tourism industry in Vermont be sustainable and effective going forward. We're just about to make that plan public, and we will take it on a roadshow of sorts, around the state so that people understand how that impacts their work. So it really lays out a foundation for us in terms of where we can focus our efforts, as well as where we can, there may be projects that we're not able to take the lead on, but, like I said, other partners can take the lead on as well. So again, any of these I could go into a lot more detail on, but just in general, so the committee understands, we've also been able to invest in additional research. So we finished up a visitation study where we were able to do intercept surveys I think it was 66 locations around the state and at 27 events to understand, who comes here, where do they come from, what are they interested in doing, and so forth. So we have a lot of more information on that now. We're also able to do a brand perception study. So really trying to dive into like, what does the Vermont brand mean to people? This was really helpful because we have not been able to do this type of brand research in over 10 years. And I'll be honest that, some of the results are a little sobering. I mean, not things that we didn't know, but, they do state that, Vermont's problem, or Vermont's issue, I should say, is not active rejection. It's just, we're just overlooked. We're just not top of mind compared to other destinations. There was one stat that sticks with me that they did just an open-ended question of, where would you like to go in the next 3 years? And only 14.8% of people said Vermont, which put us below Maine, put us below Massachusetts, some of our other neighbors. And the follow-up question was just, they just don't know, just Vermont's just not on the radar, just not top of mind. So I just mentioned that so that folks understand that we are in a very competitive environment. We really can't, take for granted that everyone knows how wonderful we are. We will continue to do our best to tell that story, but we do have, again, headwinds in that as well. We were also able to do, we were able to hire a firm for us to dive into what a BIPOC specific visitation strategy looks like. So we have some new campaign creative that we are going to be launching this summer around that is specifically to make sure that we're telling our story in a way that is attractive to visitors of color. So that's very exciting for us. Additional economic impact analyses, like I already talked about. And then we did run a grant program, which again, I can provide more details on. We were able to do some workforce development activities through partnerships, both with UVM, where they have now have a new hospitality management certificate program, and with VOBA on some outdoor recreation workshops for bike mechanics, trail builders, and ski techs. And then you may have heard about this already, but we were also able to fund the development of the Vermont Core Toolkit, which is really a toolkit for communities to articulate and really do the data collection and figure out, what does investments in outdoor recreation, what will the return be for their communities? That's also going to be launching in the next couple of weeks. So another exciting kind of crossover between outdoor recreation, community, economic development, and visitation. Then my third slide here is another big part of our work is, it's not just visitation that we're thinking about. We're thinking about relocation. We know that there is a continuum between, some folks who visit here and then they decide they want to move here. But really the reasons why people move here are all over the map. And through their sort of history of trying to figure out, where we can be most effective in helping people relocate to the state, we've really realized that it's our local partners who really have the most, they're having the conversations that we need to be having. And so we stood up the GROW program, Grants for Relocation Outreach Work, 2 years ago, thanks to funding that we received from the legislature. So thank you for that. I would say it has been amazingly successful in the sense that now we have these regional partners so that when we're doing our marketing on, that top of the funnel approach and getting people to think about Vermont, we have now a lead management system so that when folks come to Think Vermont, we encourage them to fill out our Connect with a Vermonter form, which just asks some very basic questions about, where they might be interested in moving to the state. If they don't know, that's fine. And then we can connect them with one of our 15 partners on the ground that really can have those one-on-one conversations, which is where the kind of the magic happens, because everybody's a little bit different, whether they have questions about finding a job or housing or, childcare or whatever it else is they need. Those on the ground partners really are the ones who are able to make that relocation a reality. So we did our first 2 years of the grant program. We were able to document that we brought in 97 family units to the state. So that's 195 Vermonters came, as you can see, from 32 different states around the country, as well as international. We're always going to undercount. It's just impossible not to, because it's not as if people like check in when they move here. But it is really encouraging. And we do now have partners that cover the entire state. And we also do have partnership agreements, grant agreements with Vermont Professionals of Color Network, as well as Out in the Open. So we're able to support both BIPOC and LGBTQ plus folks who specifically ask for assistance or having a conversation around those issues. I will say that there's another major part of this is not just about relocation, but it's about retention. So when we're talking about outreach, we're really looking to our grantees to create events or other opportunities where new Vermonters who already live here are able to interact together, and so that those new Vermonters really do feel welcome in their communities and can make those connections. So hopefully they feel comfortable and very excited about staying here. And then the last slide I have, and then I'll stop sharing and happy to answer any other questions, is just to note that the Chief Marketing Office, there are 2 positions on our team that make up the Chief Marketing Office. Those 2 positions are now co-located with the Chief Communications Office in the agency administration. Rebecca Kelly holds that role right now, which has just been a really nice way for us to make sure that those teams are really supporting each other, especially when they are prioritized right now on assisting other state agencies and departments with the Universal Digital Accessibility Initiative. You folks may have heard a bit about that from other folks, but really making sure that the state can live up to its obligations under the ADA to bring digital communications in line with the new standard by the April deadline. So that team has really been working very hard to make sure that, like I said, that communications and other folks around the state enterprise are able to make sure that all communications, specifically websites and PDFs on our websites and so forth, are accessible to anybody and everybody. So I'm going to stop sharing, hopefully, so that now I can see everybody again. So thank you for that opportunity. I hope I didn't go through that either too fast or too slowly, depending on what you're thinking.
No, it was fine. Thank you, Heather. Jonathan?
Thank you. Hi, Heather. My question pertains to, I know last year, as you mentioned, we heard a lot about the eclipse and sort of sometimes the opportunities land at the boat. With America 250 happening this year, I've sort of observed that I Love New York has a whole series of events for the Noble Train of Artillery. Do you know if any of Vermont's revolutionary history is factoring into any efforts on your parts with respect to America 250?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Well, for one, I can say that, it's a big year. This year, Vermont also had a lot of, events in 1776. So we'll be doing more events as it goes into 2027. We have decided that this is going to be a showpiece of our inspiration guide this year. So we have a specific multi-page spread in our annual inspiration guide that is distributed to anybody who asks for additional information for the state that talks about Vermont 250 and the things that are going on. I think the thing that's a little bit challenging, which I'll be very honest with, is that we're all in when it comes to promoting whatever it is that is happening in the state. But we don't do product development, quote unquote. We're not the ones creating the events or creating the experiences. And so I know that the Vermont Humanities Council and other folks have been able to provide some grants to local organizations who are putting on Vermont 250 events and so forth. But that's not a role that we undertake to actually create those events. But we have a filter on our events calendar to make sure that people can find out about all the things that are happening around the state. And like I said, we've already devised a couple different ways to make sure that we're getting attention to those events.
What is the Vermont Inspiration Guide?
That is our printed piece. It's our fulfillment piece. So if somebody, believe it or not, people still call 1-800 Vermont. I don't know if you folks know that we actually still have a phone number. If they ask for more information or they send us a request for email, it's a printed, I forget how many pages it is, 50 pages. That talks about all the different regions in Vermont, different places, ideas for itineraries, places to go and to stay. So it basically is like, hey, I'm interested in coming to Vermont. What have you got? We send them this guide. It's also in all the welcome centers and it is distributed elsewhere throughout New England.
So it's not something that would be touching the whole of the sort of the individuals that you are making contact with who are expressing interest. It's sort of a niche for the catalog friendly?
There is a digital version. So yes, catalog friendly. People who want to flip through it, we do make it available to them. But it is also, any guides or other, brochures that we have for specific, uh, like the fishing guide or the hunting guide and so forth. We also have those digitally available on our website. So it's available in both places. But I think there's 200,000 of them that are distributed each year. So it has a wide distribution.
Thanks.
Yeah, so thanks very much. I appreciate that you're not in the business of hosting, events and things like that, but I'm thinking about America 250, and I'm familiar with communities in my neck of the woods. They're really, really doing a lot of work around that, mainly through I think, the State Historical Society. And, maybe some of it's local, but I could imagine it might be something that people coming from out of state, tourists and stuff, would be interested in knowing that kind of information, when they're stopping, wherever they are. And because it's kind of a challenge for communities to try to get out the word, you know what I mean?
I absolutely understand that. And so I look at it as a partnership. So even though it's maybe not our role to actually do the event planning, we are more than happy. And that's, like I said, that's why we've put it in the inspiration guide. That's why we have this special filter on our website to make sure that anyone who comes in, quote unquote, the front door that we're in charge of, that we make sure that we tell them about this. And there will continue to be more opportunities as we go through the summer, and more of these events are happening around, July 4th and so forth, for us to be doing, our email blasts. We have our owned media, right? Our way to continue to talk to people who are interested. So it's definitely a focus for us. It's a unique offering for this year. We're happy to make the most of it.
Thank you.
Hi, Heather. Thank you very much for all of your information. I was curious, you said that you worked with a consultant to look at BIPOC tourism and trying to get more folks into Vermont. I was wondering if there was kind of continued conversation about just cultural sensitivity and making sure that our businesses are able to accommodate folks.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I will say that I only talked very briefly about our destination management plan. But there's a couple different objectives within that, and I'm happy to send the committee a copy of that as soon as it's public. One is about just diversifying our visitor base as one of our objectives, and the other is about making sure that we enhance the Vermont visitor experience. And within that is, what can be our role to make sure that we are uplifting DEI initiatives for our tourism properties, to whether that's ambassador training, and make sure that there is that cultural sensitivity that's part of what it means to be a frontline hospitality worker, or even if it's just making sure that we're elevating these considerations to leadership folks within the tourism and hospitality space. So we worked with a company called Proverb out of Boston to do this. Through our partnership with them, we did develop a training outline that, once we can identify some funding, that we could make available to folks within the tourism and hospitality space. We also work with Travel Unity, which is another kind of travel organization, to make sure that let folks know when there's training opportunities available. And I know that training is only one part of it, but we do see that it is part of our role to make sure that we are helping to educate folks as to what it means to have a welcoming experience. It's certainly the best as we can, as to what we can control.
Thank you.
Can't.
Are you partnered with VTPOC or Unlikely Riders or any other kind of BIPOC organizations in Vermont on that work?
Yeah, we work with Vermont Professionals of Color Network through our GROW program. They're one of our grantees. And so within that, they do both relocation work as well as retention work. So we work with that team quite a bit. We have worked with Unlikely Riders. And one of the, within the, I referenced the bigger budget book, we do have a section on our DIA initiatives, just to kind of list the different ways we're trying to think about how we can advance those priorities. One one particular tactic that we've focused in on is, we do work with paid content creators, so influencers. The only ones that we work with, we've decided that we're going to do that specifically to work with folks that are, either persons of color or LGBTQ plus identifying and so forth, so that we're able to focus those efforts to make sure that we're telling our story through their eyes and their experiences here in Vermont. So it's just one of the ways where we try to make sure that we're telling those stories, I guess is the best way I can say it. If that's helpful in terms of partnerships.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Jonathan?
Sorry, this is a question about the ups and downs slide there. And I think a $4,007,872 federal grant. I think that was the EDA state tourism grant. So that, am I seeing it correctly? Was that like just for 1 year, or is that something that you expect? Is there another application in? I'm just wanting to know, like, how is that impacting operations? What did it impact? And will you be feeling the lack of it in your operations this year?
Yes, I wish there was an opportunity to reapply for it, but no, it was a one-time coming out of the pandemic, basically a block grant to the state. The amount that we received was proportional to the loss in travel and tourism due to the pandemic that Vermont experienced. That 4.2 million is just what we had spent down in the past fiscal year. That money has now been fully expended. We don't expect to have any going forward. So, excuse me, really what we knowing that was one-time funds, we prioritized projects that we knew we could kind of benefit from going forward. So whether that was asset creation, to have new videos that we can put in the market next summer, this work with Proverb, to have this new BIPOC campaign, some of the research, we did do a grant program as we were able, but we can't do that going forward. So, going forward, we will try to continue doing some of the research that we started because we think it's really important to inform our work. But some of the, we can't run grant programs like we've done before. We can't do the level of research we've done in the past. We certainly can't do the level of marketing we've done in the past. But we did think very carefully about how we spent that money so that we could basically stretch the effects out over time best we could.
And so if it were some of the takeaways from these previous slides about destination marketing or destination development, there's takeaways there, maybe some that you shared with us, that you can use as sort of as data points to help drive decision-making into the future?
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, we went into this knowing that this was a bit of a windfall, I'll be honest. And it was amazing that we were able to do things like the destination management plan, like the visitor research, like the brand research that we just never had the ability to do with our budget in the past. And, just in terms of, like I said, as a creation, just we were able to do photography contracts with, photographers and videographers across the state to just build up our image library, to make sure that it reflects, Vermont of today, that it reflects, all the people that we want to come to the state, things like that. It takes money. And so we wanted to make sure that we were using those resources when we had them to be able to utilize and benefit from in the future.
That makes sense. Thank you very much.
Sure.
So Heather, every time I had a question, your next sentence answered it. So I appreciate that. It doesn't normally happen that way. Just looking through the budget detail, it looks like you're fully staffed, which is great. How's your staffing level compared to pre-pandemic? Do you know off the top of your head?
It's the same. So the 12 positions that we have for FY27 is down 2 positions from FY26 because we did have 2 limited service positions due to this EDA funding. But those we had one of them has already ended and one of them will end at the end of this fiscal year. So we're back to where we were pre-pandemic, I guess I would say. We had a slight bump because of the EDA, 2 limited service positions. Now we're back to our traditional staffing level. And yes, we are fully staffed.
And
if that answers your question, sorry.
Yeah, that does. I worry when I hear that we have an opportunity to spend $1 and make 500 or, somewhere along those lines and we're not doing it. And so, and I understand we're making choices all across the budget to do different things and to protect people in lots of different ways. And so, just, I don't really have a question. I'm just putting that.
I agree that our visitor economy, we are on the revenue side of the equation, right? We would love nothing more than to grow the pie for all of us, to take care of all of our priorities.
Any other questions for Heather? Herb?
I may have missed it. But in terms of your overall budget, how is it, is there a reduction from the previous years or in how much?
There's not a reduction. We were able to take advantage of the 3% budget increase target that we were given.
Okay, so it's
so that-
increasing overall?
Minus
A little bit.
the,
Yeah.
minus federal billions.
Exactly. Exactly. So it doesn't feel like it, but
Yeah. We're back to normal again.
we're back to normal.
Yeah, I just didn't know if you were caught in this sort of priority squeeze kind of thing. I guess not. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the time today. And again, I apologize for not being there in person,
We understand.
but happy to follow up if there are other questions at any time.
Thanks, Heather.
Feel better.
Thank you. Thank you.
What?
Thank you for having us back.
Coming back.
And specifically, I would ask, what would you like to hear at this point from us?
I
It'd
think
be helpful.
one of the questions, and I know it's posted to our webpage, is the Canadian, how well has that been working for us, having a Canadian office? And I think that's been posted to our webpage, but
There are copies coming around right now if you would like a hard copy. And Tim is really the master of ceremonies when it comes to the SITEP organization, has been working with them for 5 years now. Is that right? So I may not be able to answer your questions as well as Tim. So that would be great. We have provided you with some information around, I think you really want to know what's the return on the investment of these funds. And I think we need to recognize that it is a maybe painstakingly patient process, but one that we need to continue to do year over year. Tim can talk to you about the companies that are on the list that are in front of you. This again is over a period of time. The report was sent to you, the most recent report from SITEP. You'll see a lot of companies on there, and then you'll see a lot of companies that haven't had an interest. If we can get a couple companies a year, that's a home run, because those companies then are staying year over year. That's what we want to build, is we want to build year over year. If you're a baseball fan, singles score runs. And so we want to be able to score runs every year. So I don't know, Tim, if you would like Tim to walk through this, just to kind of talk a little bit more about how we got into our relationship with SITEP and the importance of that relationship.
I think when we started this a number of years ago, we knew it wasn't going to turn around anything overnight, but I think we're starting to see things start to happen, are happening now. More Canadian companies coming down to Vermont.
And I would credit Tim with that. He recently had another group of folks coming from Canada. You do that quite frequently, actually.
It was your first week.
It was my first week, and I learned a little French along the way. Although I knew a little French because I lived up in Newport, but not enough. So maybe you want to kind of walk through the process.
Yeah, I mean, well, I believe it came out of this committee years ago to actually to hire an in-market representative in Canada, right? And there was always I tell people, like, it only took 100 years for us to get a in-market representative in Canada. But we did hire CEDAP, and believe their operations is where they put letters out and contacts out to all these companies that they believe are poised and ready for the market. And then they look back on the contacts, and then that's when they bring myself in to go meet them. And then with that interest, if they pick a particular area, that's when I actually bring in our other Vermont ecosystem partners, like an RD, the Regional Development Corporations, or a mayor, or someone that's involved, realtors a lot of times too, commercial realtors that you can bring into the fold, because it depends on what they're looking for. And I would say, obviously, there are some companies in that funnel, so to speak, that are still in the funnel. They're returning. Like that, some people are just looking at the market. They're looking at what the prospects are, and then they're slowly in their business. Hey, now is the right time for us to now truly look again. So we get a lot of that lately too. I would say that over time, a lot of these folks, obviously, what's happened in the past year has affected a little bit as far as how they look at the American market, or it's the uncertainty has left them not jumping into this as well. But I think the newest one here, we just got we had a building in St. Johnsbury Industrial Park, which 3 companies jumped on right away. We brought this up before. Sometimes it's our facilities tend to be our Achilles heel sometimes, but the Canadian company jumped in there quickly, and it looks like they are moving in. So that's a great metal fabrication company moving into an empty building, an industrial park. Yeah, I mean, I can walk you through some of these companies. They're here. Some of them aren't that very big, but they're growing. One is up in Newport, and I'm looking at Sharon Marcotte. There's a one person runs an interior design company. He's moved here to the US. He's got a warehouse, and it's just growing. His business is growing. He's hired more people, and now he's looking to expand. And that's exactly, it's only been 3 years, and already him coming into the US, and he's getting these accounts in Southern New England. But he has this warehouse in the center up in Newport, so he can go home to Quebec and come back. He loves it. I mean, it just shows like it's small, but they can come here and grow, and they've got support from Dave Snedeker up the RDC up there, and ourselves, and that slowly we can start working on. So now we're trying to work on how do we expand his facility.
So I don't know if I answered the tariffs question correctly last time I was here, so let's do a fact check. What are we hearing tariff-wise from businesses, Canadian businesses in particular?
It depends on what sector they're in. I think that's the key. And right now, I know that there's talk about lowering the tariffs on steel and aluminum. So I think a lot of times we're hearing companies that were, I want to say, the yellow equipment, the heavy equipment sector, folks that things were going across the border several times, like snowplows and big excavators and loaders. They were the ones contacting us because high tariffs were definitely affecting them. They were looking, we actually have a snow blower company that moved. They actually have a company in Barrie that actually assembles and puts these things together for them. So we get a lot of that too. They're expanding here, but they're actually retaining or utilizing or growing jobs in these other companies. This company in Barrie, they need to make their own machinery, but now they're assembling for them, and it's allowed them to grow a few more employees to help out on other things in there. So I mean, and there's always those kind of situations as well. I would say that's the biggest one, is that they were looking across. The other folks, it's the uncertainty. They just don't know what's happening tomorrow, or do they come here? Or there's also, they're really afraid of the border. And we've heard that a lot of times. They're afraid to even cross. They'll go look out buildings because they don't know what's going to happen at the border. I mean, a lot of it, I think, is news from their media, maybe blowing things out of proportion, but regardless, it's a true fear that they have coming into the US.
And so what we have going for us, quite frankly, is our relationship building, and that's what this organization helps us with. We don't have a lot of, and you'll see the lost prospects at the bottom of the last page. There are probably more lost prospects than that. We don't have all of the benefits that some other states are providing, but we do have relationship building, and that's what we need to focus on.
And I was gonna say, and those we put in there because those are the ones that we spent so much time with. They were, 11th hour. We thought they were coming here. They were, one-on-one meetings with you guys and the governor, and they're coming. And but at the end of the day, it was the incentives or a building or things that we just can't offer here, right? So Matt, the thin down was the one that kind of broke my heart. So much time with them. But at the end of the day, New York gave them a building and gave them more funding to go to Massena. And even though I say why Massena, I don't know, but it's all right. But that's the reality of how some of these folks work. So
I think we thought we were going to have them in Fairhaven. That's where.
right, we looked at Fairhaven, right, and a lot of other places. But overall, it's been and I've said this before, I mean, we can't catch fish unless we put the hook in the water, and that's what this is about. I mean, any kind of international promotion that we're doing, but obviously that is our main fishing ground. We know that, and I see that. I think we're going to be seeing more. I think that we're still their market, right? And they still need to come here. And a lot of them have U.S. contracts, and it's almost worth their while to come here. And sometimes it is just having that ready facility. Sometimes seems to be our factor too. I don't know if you're aware, up in Quebec, they have it's Invest Quebec. Has anyone heard of this? Where the Quebec government has a lot of money set aside to help grow businesses and provide buildings. If you've been to Sherbrooke, you go to the industrial park, it's all brand new buildings, and it's all from Invest Quebec. So I think when they come here and they see our stock of buildings, it's a whole different. They're 1972 or earlier. So those are kind of things that we see as a little bit of impediment sometimes. It's just our building stock and available buildings. Or if an available building is there, they now have 3 or 4 smaller companies have gone and moved into them, and we don't have that building anymore. I mean, that's a good problem too, but it's an issue. And I think your RIDIT program, I mean, that's one thing that, I think we need to push more is see if we can get some of these spec buildings put up. So I know we can fill them, but I think it's very hard for some of our RDCs to take that chance of putting up a building. But I think we're getting close to them.
So I saw I think looking in the economic development ups and downs, about $150,000 for, say, the fiscal analysis, financial analysis for CHIP. Is the contract here with CDEP, is it in that ballpark?
It is. It's actually 2 years is 150. It's pretty low comparatively, but I think they like Vermont. I mean, it's kind of one of those things that we know like this is. So it's 75 a year we've been doing. Yeah.
And assessing, it seems to me like it's good to see the results of that, both in what you get and then who you miss out on and why. Do you have for your assessment of that contract's value to the agency or to the department? Is it mostly sort of a look back like this, or are you looking for, okay, here's this many jobs? Do you have an internal metric, or is it kind of, that there's a lot of variation year to year in what you can expect to see or hope for? I'm just wondering.
Well, I mean, there's definitely a lot of variation, and I mean the variety of companies. And one thing that's happened lately, I mean, basically, I think did the Montreal was their first. And Metropolitan Montreal is where most of all of our leads came from. And lately, we kind of stressed like, we want to look at Sherbrooke a little more, and we're actually getting, I think, more high quality leads out of Sherbrooke, because in Montreal, we're also in competition with Plattsburgh, and New York State has a little more people than we do, a little more funding opportunities, and they're active and that's a really hard thing to compete with, I think, sometimes. But I mean, to answer your question, I would say that for that money, for what we're paying them and the leads that they're generating, and it's a variety of leads. It's sometimes companies that they're looking for me to put them in contact with customers, which is say that's not my role, but they're out there just reaching out to the whole community. And then the best thing is they know the culture, they know the ecosystem, they know the language, and it makes a big difference when I'm talking and they find out, oh, you're in Montreal. They love the fact that our CDEP rep is a Vermont rep that's in Montreal. They love it. So
Two other clarifying questions. One was, are any of these entities, have they purchased the buildings, or are they all, to your knowledge, just?
No, it's both. It's both leasing, and it depends on the building. It depends on what the situation is, or the right fit is the key. So
you mentioned the industrial developments. Yeah, RIDIP. Has there been any appetite do you think uptake would go up if it were forgivable?
I mean, this is my opinion. I'm not going to talk for our commissioner in our department, that if it was a larger share, and there's a 2080, I think has been the anchor in this program a little bit. It has not been. I think we would have saw more risk being taken, more buildings put up. It was a higher match. I think you know this, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Jonathan, there's currently a conversation about just that. And how to get the money out in a more expeditious way.
Great.
Yeah. And going back to CDEP, semiconductor conference is coming up, and how are they helping us with that?
Yeah, so CDEP also not only represents us through lead generation, they also represent us at certain trade shows, and they're also a conduit for us to go make contacts or make connections. So even though the Northeast Semiconductor Manufacturing Corps is something the state's done, they're contacting companies on the Quebec side, working with the American Chamber of Commerce in Quebec. They're working with the Federation of Chambers of Commerce of Quebec, which is very large, 148 chambers of commerce alone in Quebec. So they represent us in there, and they help us recruit, get the word out, get the right connections to hold that. Because this year we're holding the Northeast Semiconductor Manufacturing Corridor Summit. It will be in Vermont. We haven't picked a date yet, but we're working on that as well. So that's a big deal, and it also leads to I think it's almost a segue to what we're doing internationally in promotion. I mean, our largest private employer does semiconductor manufacturing. We are in the middle of this. We are the center. We are the belt buckle on this belt of semiconductor manufacturers, and we need to attract people to that. I think we're doing that. We just had a rep that was in Singapore and Malaysia, where they do there's a lot of supply chain companies in that sector. And we've already had two, and they were just there 2 weeks ago, and we're already having 2 meetings with folks looking at Vermont as a place to invest in. So
We're looking at dovetailing the semiconductor conference with the Eastern Canadian Premiers and New England Governors Conference sometime this fall.
when we can find a time that Quebecers are not on vacation, I think that's the key. Yeah, good luck.
I'm curious about how this all kind of fits into the larger conversation about the sister state program and how you're kind of envisioning international trade linking into that. Or not.
So international trade going into
that program, or I'm kind of trying to understand more clearly what the fine dividing lines are between something like this where the state is paying out to do recruiting versus something like the sister state program, which is definitely more clearly like regional, but also that's not necessarily on the state to pay. I'm confused about where all of it is.
Well, I mean, yeah, right. I think you can divide it. I mean, I even think my job is divided. I mean, one thing is imports and exports, right? That's one thing that we do, which is trade, bilateral trade with whatever country, right? We're either taking Vermont commodities, having it go to another country, which brings in income into our state. And then imports, which people bring into our state, but they make money selling it, and therefore brings more money to our state. Then there's the investment, outside foreign investment into our state by either starting a company, expanding their company, or buying an existing Vermont company. So I guess that's like the three legs of the stool I work with. And all of it, I guess, is really trade, so to speak. But and I never know if I'm answering your question.
Could you mention a couple of the places you have gone most recently and how important that is?
Well, most recently, I mean, so one thing is we're identifying places. One place is like Iceland, and we actually have a person here, and she's the reason that we're in Iceland. She's right behind here. It's because we have a person she knows every single person in Iceland, well, it's very similar to Vermont, but knowing that here's a country that when the last 10 years realized that they need to go outside their island to bring money back into their island. And they also identify with us because of our size. And they, just like us, they punch above their weight, and that their technology is one of the places where they're growing. I mean, outside of fisheries, we do not have a fisheries connection in Vermont, but we do have a tech connection. And I know that she believes as well, I think we are the softest landing place that you can get into anywhere in our country. Like, you're the US market, but now you've landed in a supportive environment. Vermont is very supportive in so many different ways. And I always no one's here originally from New Jersey, but I'm going to say New Jersey, if you go to northern New Jersey, you're going to be a highly competitive environment where people do not want to maybe see you succeed. They might look at you as competitive, and they're going to do everything you can to make sure you don't. I think here it's the opposite. Again, that was a generalization. But here we have such a supportive environment, and realizing we have access to New York, Boston, Southern New England. We have great transportation, but the most important thing is we have accessible government. You people are our key to so many factors in business, like, because it doesn't happen in other states. You can't just show up and then go sit in the House Commerce and start talking to somebody and actually having you affect your business. It's very unique to Vermont. And I think Hato would probably agree with that as well. So I mean, that's one place that we're looking at. And it's something we didn't look at before, but now I think we have a key, strong person that can help us. And like I said, she knows everybody there. And we're in connection with Business Iceland. We've had a webinar, we've had some companies, and now we're looking at either trade potential or investment potential from that. That makes sense.
It does, but it doesn't quite answer my question.
I know, I never do. I don't think I ever do.
Well, I guess I'm trying to understand, like, we've worked on the sister state.
Hmm.
I think that seems like an interesting bucket on how we're getting our relationships with other countries, other regions, other municipalities. I think what I'm trying to understand is how exactly, if that is the goal, to kind of create a uniform structure in that, how are we also going about, how does that apply to trade? Like, how is,
Oh, I see. So this is a sister state question, I think, more than anything, right? It's
I mean, it's a little bit of both. I guess I'm having a hard time parsing out like the goals of each
Right.
side, you know?
well, the one I was talking about before, I mean, that is about us bringing in like that investment into Vermont, which is needed a lot of times. I mean, I think every state's out there looking for investment to come in, bringing that outside money in. But with the sister state, I think it's on so many different levels. Like trade is an aspect of creating a sister state, but it might not be the main tenet of the reason we created that partnership. But there's always, at the end of the day, that will open the doors for trade.
Right.
I think that's maybe the best way to explain it. With the
It may
sister state.
start culturally and it may end up with trade.
Right, exactly. And I think that makes total sense. I guess I'm wondering about kind of the form and function. If he has the Irish trade, they're interested in having a relationship with us. I think there are also other countries that are interested in having relationships with us. So I'm just trying to get clarity on like how, does that go through? Does that go through? Does that go through sister state? Like, what is the vision that we're trying to kind of create with our?
I see. So, I mean, I can tell you what we do right now. We actually, our office or my little international division that does the state trade expansion program, where we get money from the Small Business Administration to help Vermont companies export, find new markets, compliance, market reports, to attend trade shows and meet distributors in foreign countries. We have monies, hopefully, again, to do that. So that comes through us. And so it's every company's different. I mean, I think one of my fine examples is, anyone familiar with Ann Clark's cookie cutters?
We talked about that last time, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
But with what they did in England, and we helped out with that market study and they started making the food dye, and they made it of the colors of all the different soccer teams, and it's blown up. It's brilliant, genius, right? But I mean, I think that the timing, as far as international trade, I think it's just kind of becomes through our office. It's economic development, and as is foreign direct investment, is kind of gone through us to be like at least that initial contact until we can get them out to the local regions or the commercial realtors. And they don't need to come to us, but it tends to be on a statewide basis. We can help them navigate. I never answer your question.
We will continue to crack at it.
Just before we move on to talk about grants. So I thought, we had the Taiwan delegation was here last week, the Director General from Boston. And we had a discussion with them, and they were asking about us possibly having an office in Taipei. And just wondering what your thoughts are if we started looking into replicating what we have now in Montreal, having an office maybe in Southeast Asia, that, doing the same type, hiring a company that would go out there and do the same. Because I think, as said, we know that we're becoming now this tech hub with Global Foundries and with UVM, that I think it'd be a big advantage for us to try to connect with the Asian market as well.
Well, I think it is agreed. And I think, you know, I mean, I look at other states that are similar to us, like say Idaho. Idaho has 9 foreign trade representatives around the world, and they're just a little bit more people than we have here. They understand that importance of those connections, right? But the Pacific Rim and Asia is obviously, we can go out and with that, if there's extra funds, we can hire a rep just like CDEP to represent us, and then we pick the trade shows or we pick them, you know, we can make that scope of work what we want it to be, as far as making introductions, or whether it's just foreign direct investment only, or is it connecting Vermont companies to Asian companies. That's another thing we can put in there. So I mean, I think it only makes sense, right? So
The cost of an office, I think, might not be the most beneficial, but the opportunity to hire people in the Asian Pacific Rim would certainly be something that would benefit the economy here. Yeah.
much easier to have a rep than a brick and mortar office, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just maybe keep.
We like that.
When we start talking about the budget, let her go into the pros.
I mean, I just went to Austria and there are so many states. I was the only person there from the US. They were all European reps representing states. And I think they look at it like they know the market, they know the people, they speak German but they,
So if I, brief clarification, we're looking at $150,000 over a period of 2 years for our Canadian SIDEP organization. The STEP program is a federal program that we can hope for, we're going to get money for, that will send businesses overseas so that they can do external trade. Separate silos of money. And I'm going to give you one other thing here that we put together. It may raise questions later on, but last year we were provided with $150,000 to do very specific things. In addition to the office that we have in Canada. These are some of the things that you're hearing Tim talk about right now that this fund allowed us to do, like work with Iceland, go to Austria, do some very specific targeted marketing and international trade work. And you'll see we've spent $40,000 of $150,000, and you're going to say, well, what are you going to do with the rest of that? We have it earmarked, and you'll see at the end here where we have opportunities coming up that we will be spending that money in very positive ways. So again, a separate silo of money, but we want you to, again, be reminded of everything you've done for us, and thank you very much. And moving forward, Vermont's opportunity is reaching out. We have to do that. You heard Heather talking about that. We're not growing enough people to support our businesses here. We need to go out and get more people and bring them here. And so that's an important part of the GROW program that Heather's working on right now. And I saw the results of that as an RDC director in Rutland, because we got a GROW grant, got it 4 years in a row. And that interpersonal work is really what brings people here. And it's the same thing with companies. It's the interpersonal work.
And I was going to mention on this, you'll see it Select USA. Select USA is a program run by our commercial service, US Commercial Service, where they actually are going out and they are vetting and recruiting companies in their countries that they work in or their cities. And that's so that we go through that program. We're not just randomly going over there looking, hey, I'm sandwich board, come to Vermont. It's we're going to these programs and they're looking at people that are poised and ready to enter the US market. So that's just using that as a partner program. And it tends to be very affordable as well to do it that
And
way.
it's not being done on millions of dollars, as you can see. It is targeted and it's making a splash.
Question on that. Two things. One, I'm assuming that a lot of the earmark will be going to that corridor summit. That seems like, will that be like a 4-day thing? Or was wondering the time thing for that? And the second question, Vermont priority sectors for the French Technology and Investment Mission. Technology, could you,
Sure.
what are the priority sectors?
So, well, the first thing, it's a 2-day summit.
2 day.
Yeah, and it's and last year it was held in Quebec 2 years ago, in New York City last year. Now it's our turn with the corridor, and it's pretty high. I mean, I go to those. I have no idea what they're talking about. I just attend and smile. So, and the second one is that we actually had a company that's actually, they have an incubator in Montreal. It's called Resaway. They are a French company that have basically recruited French companies to move to Montreal. And they've figured, you know, like, by the way, a lot of those companies now are looking at the US market and they're going, we want to be just direct from France to the US. And it's obviously, it's tech sector, which could be anything. It's green tech, clean tech, biotech, med tech, you name it. They're getting those companies coming over. So and they usually vet it like these people are, again, poised and ready. They're already making income. It's not startup. It's they're looking like you're ready because we are the market. So we're going to use that company to actually help us recruit. They bring them over here and we're going to show them our ecosystem, which tends to be, you know, when it comes to the tech world, it really is Chittenden County. It depends where, you know, we take them to Hula, we take them to UVM, we take them to the different colleges in the area, and they're looking, tends to be where we use that for our recruiting tool when it comes to technology, because that's where the hub is.
And one thing that's real important is the person sitting next to me, because they like to see the same person in the same seat doing the same work. That's very important to our partners. So don't go anywhere.
Or on the person why we're losing. No, but yeah, obviously it's that relationship is a big deal, right? And it's keeping that steady relationship of consistency and keeping the partnership open. So answer your question.
Yeah.
One day I'm going to answer Emily's question.
Talk about grants. And I know there's a lot of grants that you get out, that would be.
Yep, we might need the chair.
He doesn't want.
It's fun.
You can find this committee, it's on our webpage and it's under Dan's name. Budget book, and what page is it?
83,
Page 83.
the right one.
Better be.
Good afternoon, committee. Dan Dickerson, Director of Administrative Services for the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And you want to talk specifically DED grants?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so the page that you're looking at, this is one of those sort of generic reports that's put out by our new budget system, Adaptive. For each department within ACCD, we do an inventory of grants that we intend to send out the door, assuming that the legislature authorizes the funding. And so here we've itemized basically the same grants at the same funding level as the prior year. One thing that I do, and so you see them all there, and I guess maybe before I call out the one item that I want to call out, you know, are there any questions that you're specifically looking to have answered as far as funding or programmatic details?
Nothing, not a specific program. I think we want to understand like how you vet the grants, how you look at performance, make sure that grantees are performing in the way that they're supposed to, return on investment, that type of thing.
We need to know what grants we're specifically thinking about, but
I think we already heard about the training program.
right. So
It's big enough.
I think that is big enough, or
Okay.
almost.
Let's take the RDC block grants. You know, how's the money divided? Is it, is it evenly divided?
Great question.
RDCs, if it's not, then, what? Who stands out, who's not? Are there RDCs that are performing better than others? And how do we help the ones that aren't performing as well get up to that caliber, that type of thing?
So each RDC does receive the same amount of money. It's about $132,000 to $134,000. That does not fully fund any of their offices, but it supports their offices. Each is required to write up, I don't think you can tell us all about it, write up what they plan to do for the year, but we have specific items that we are looking for, which are workshops around finance for small businesses. Visits to businesses at a certain number and a level, having targeted goals, so they may in their region may be looking specifically around a sector that they want to be focusing on. We want them to have lists of commercial properties so that when someone is interested in a warehouse at 10,000 square feet with three-phase power, do they have that in their region? Because Tim might be sitting here saying, hey, I've got somebody that needs 100,000 square feet. He'll then put out an email to the RDC director saying, do you have something at 100,000 square feet with overhead doors and three-phase power, 20-foot ceilings and so forth? So there are very specific items that we are looking for within their contract. They provide us with an update 4 times a year on how all that is going. We review those narratives. Are some doing the better than others? It's hard to say because of the regions in the state. It's going to be much different in the Northeast Kingdom than it is going to be in Chittenden County. So we can look through those reports and we can make suggestions, but we are looking for particular outcomes, particularly around business visits. Are they connecting businesses with the Vermont Training Program? Are they connecting them with the Small Business Development Center? So there are certain things we're looking for, and they provide a spreadsheet, quite frankly, of all their visits, who they're connecting people with, so we can then see who's doing a better job than someone else. But it also depends on the sector and the region. Am I accurately describing that? So you go through that, but yeah.
Happy to testify.
Sorry, I can't ask questions. The Vermont Training Program, we did provide some information in your packet about the number of jobs that have received funding. We have a whole list of who they are, and I think I provided you with the final report for the Vermont Training Program. It shows the size of the businesses, the locations around the state of Vermont. And so I think that all that information is there. I don't know if you have specific questions about that. With the Vermont Training Program, we do follow-ups to make sure that the companies are paying what they said they were going to pay once they go through the program. So there definitely is follow-up with each one of the companies.
We did hear from state auditor. I think after Randall was in, Doug asked to come in. We chatted with him some. I think one critique is that a lot of these big companies already have training dollars set aside because they know they're going to have to train people. And I guess he's wondering how we we're giving them training dollars when they already have a budget for training.
Great question. So there is a question on the application indicating, is this a recurring type of training or not? We're not going to do the recurring training, and we're not going to supplant the money that they should be training their people with anyway. Is it a difficult call sometimes? Yes. Okay, because they can certainly make an argument. We want to hire 20 more people. Would you help us hire 20 more people? We're far more inclined to help them with that than if it's a routine type of training that they go through every year. So will there be places that the auditor might say, I don't know about this one? Absolutely, because sometimes it's a bit of a judgment call.
See Vorik listed here. I'm just curious.
Again, I'm sorry.
Vorik. I'm just curious. I thought that was in the Forest and Parks
It
budget.
is in the Forest and Parks realm. That money flows through our MBRC program.
Some of it, I guess, some of it, but not all of it. Okay.
And it is tied to business development. And so we, Jackie, who is the program director there, she comes to our meetings. We work with her around how are we supporting that sector of the economy. She does a great job, by the way. She's very connected.
So some of these are small. I mean, for a, you know, so are you doing like $5,000 grants, or are you doing larger grants to one, you know, business, company, organization? It's hard for us to even. I'll back it up. I'm trying to we're funding them exactly the same year on year, these grants. Some of them, I think that you believe are quite effective. Some you're figuring out how effective they are, or they're adequately effective. Like, that's what we're trying to understand is, how are you deciding, like, you know, going to keep funding this at exactly the same amount? And is that just, what's the process to get there?
Right. If your question is, Lyle, would you like more money for those programs?
How would you rank?
We are in a difficult budget year. You haven't heard this from anybody else, I'm sure. I think that, and I will say the mantra, which is right now we are spending a lot of money in public education, and that is being carefully looked at right now. If we were not spending that money in public education and could have some of that going to different places, would we like more brownfields money? Absolutely. We have determined by the number of umbrella applications that are out there that there's $17 million worth of unmet need in brownfields revitalization. We can't ask for that money right now. We don't have that money right now. And so would we like that in the future, or some of that? Absolutely. But we need to realign, in my opinion, and maybe the opinion of the governor, realign how we're spending our funding before we can ask for more. So some of these grants, yes, Vermont Training Program can be as low as $2,500 to a business because they only have 2 employees and they're doing something specific. It could be $150,000 if it's something different. And that would be the contract that they would write with Randall Czar. And I can run through these if you'd like.
Go back to the brownfields a second. So we heard today that there's been a change in the limits of lead and arsenic in soils. And that could be detrimental to our housing programs that we're trying to stand up. Because now we might need to remediate, and especially these properties are probably in more downtowns and closer to village centers and downtown centers. And are you hearing that may be a problem? And you're probably not the right one. It might be Alex that we should be asking that question.
You've heard information that I'm unaware of as far as what you just brought up, but we do know that housing starts with the dirt. And I think I probably said that when I was here last time, that if it's not clean soil, it's not going to happen. And so, and it's expensive. Maybe when I was here last time, I talked about the hotel in Rutland, but they had several years ago, they thought it was going to take $500,000 to clean up what they affectionately call the pit. It's now going to be $5 million to clean up the pit. So prices are not going down on that.
We had a similar situation in Milton. Same thing. Project was quite literally no longer feasible because of the extra soil conditioning that needed to be done.
And why they need to take dirt to Michigan to burn it, I don't know, but that's apparently what needs to happen in this project.
But we're trying to, I guess, what we're trying to understand, just what we heard today was that this has just been, these levels have just been changed. And seems like almost like a PCB discussion that we had a couple of years ago, and the problems that that's created now with our schools. And are we lowering these standards? I guess we want to know what the science is behind it, because we've been operating under a certain standard and now and I don't know where it came from. I don't know if it was done by rule. Through ANR, or was it done by rule by the Department of Health? We're trying to find out now, but I think this could have a real chilling effect on the CHIP program, on TIF program, and any other developments that housing developments that we're trying to do.
I'm not a health and safety person. It would be interesting to know, are they meeting the EPA standards or higher? And how do we compare with other states in that regard? Those would be questions that I'm sure you're already asking.
I think we want to find out. I mean, from our understanding, it's a state levels that have changed. And I don't remember us making any changes legislatively, so we're wondering if it was done by rule or not. Not sure. So we want to investigate that more, but that could be a big problem for us.
It doesn't sound like it will decrease the cost in any way.
Means the grant funds that aren't increasing aren't gonna go as far again, right? So we're looking at the block grants and things like that for.
We are hoping for federal brownfields money, but we don't know where that's going to land. So. Yeah. Similar with NBRC funding, we do believe that we will be getting more NBRC funding, Northern Borders Regional Commission money. That seems to be solid at this point. The STEP grant, we believe will come through from the federal government. We heard that the other day. We have not been spending that down from this year because we didn't have the money. But when the money comes in, we certainly will begin to do that. Looking at other things on the list here, we talked about the RDC block grant. Any particular questions?
Go ahead.
You had mentioned a bit ago about spending money on education, and I was just, is that education, like marketing education for the public for these programs, or is that something else?
Cost of public education right now, you all
Oh, you're
know,
talking about the
is
cost of public education. I was very confused whether it was talking about the education that your department's doing, just the cost of kids.
And in my RDC days, I would say we've got this pie that's this big, and this is the tax money. And what we're doing right now is we're reslicing that same pie. And what we need to do is either grow that pie or change how much we're spending within that pie. It's a difficult conversation that you deal with every single day.
So pertaining to the Small Business Development Center, business support item, is that what percentage of a given small business development centers, does that go directly to the individual centers themselves? And is that, how much of their activities are federally funded through, small business or, SBA versus how much of the pie does that make up? And is that like a requirement on the state's part to have a skin in the game to have the small business development centers?
So Dan will correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a flow through to the SBDC, is that correct?
Yes.
And there may be in another committee a request to increase that funding to the Small Business Development Center.
And that's federal dollars that flow through? I'm sorry, I'm just.
General fund.
General fund. I mean, that's statutorily required in order to be qualifying for the SBDC services. That's sort of what I'm trying to understand is how would the number how we arrive at that number? Is that?
Yeah, I can get back to you because I'm not deep in the programmatic weeds on that, but I'm sure between Commissioner and I, we can find the right person and get back to you and let you know how that works out. One thing that I did want to flag here that impacts this and also impacts at least spending authority that we're carrying in the DED budget is, as was discussed before, there's the I want to make sure I say it right, the Rural Industrial RIDIP program. We got a one-time appropriation of $5 million several years ago. We're working to spend those down. There's a piece of the language that created that program essentially requiring that, if property is sold, the grant funding or the funding needs to come back to the state and possibly some additional above and beyond depending on the price of the sale.
Do you need legislative language to make it work?
That was something that I thought about, but I think with this separate conversation that's happening on the RIDIP, I think the goal would be to not have the requirement on the purchaser that if they sell the property down the road, the money has to come back to the state. I think we would want to do away with it. Is that?
Yeah, we're looking at having it be a grant as opposed to a loan. And then reducing, if possible, going from the 80-20 where somebody has to come in with 80% of the money. And this would only provide 20%. We'd like that to be 50-50. But we'll see where that ends in the course of the conversation. And if the money, we don't expect that money's going to come back, quite frankly, the first amount.
Yeah.
Because RDCs currently own and operate the buildings and the land. With no expectation that they're going to sell that. And so that if they do sell it, then this piece would kind of kick in. But we don't expect that will happen. And language change, that's in process for the other half.
Recalling this now.
So if they become grants, the sort of return language becomes moot because there would be that expectation.
And there was a deed restriction. The deed restriction would go away. So there are things that would make it actually work for doing what it's supposed to do, which is create new commercial stock.
Are they currently forgivable loans or just standard loans?
Standard loan with even a percentage of return built in. Yep.
This is money that went to the RDCs to help them build warehouses or whatever, and industrial complexes within their industrial parks. And then if they turn around and sold them, then the original money would come back into the fund again, so that it could be loaned out again.
That was how it was written. The money's not going out the door as a result of that, the way it's written. Yeah.
The RDCs aren't taking advantage of.
Correct. because they need to put 80% of the money in at this point, which is beyond what they're capable of doing. Most of them, yeah.
So be working on the other body to with
Yeah.
language,
Yes.
we'll see it after crossover. Possibly. Okay, understood.
Topic of skill then for that. When Andy was in here today, sort of offering testimony about the RDCs, one thing that I don't think we got a good picture of is how much variation there is in the size of the staff of regional development corporations. I asked about this with respect to the regional planning commissions. RDCs seem like by and large somewhat smaller entities, and thinking about how, what it takes to build a new building. I was wondering, do most of the RDCs have a person or people that are engaged in that sort of development work as actively as what I would have thought would be the case for a program like that?
So Andy, who you talked to, is a one-man shop. And then there are others that have 14 people. If you go to Brattleboro, they have more people, and they actually have a real estate person who is their specialist. They have benefited from having property that they own, that they are leasing out, and they make money off. That's the perfect model. If this could become a grant where it would be easier to do, I think other RDCs would benefit from this money and from the process. Interesting. It is an interesting question because every RDC is different and they're set up differently. They have different boards, they have different committees. Perhaps a conversation for the future on how that could or should look. My goal coming into my role is to work far more closely with the RDCs. Not that we weren't doing it in the past, but they are the boots on the ground. They know where everything's buried. We need to rely on their help.
And I think we were listening to some testimony last week. We're wondering about some dollars that some organizations are asking for that are kind of duplicating what the RDCs are there to do. They're your eyes and ears on the ground, right? And so that's why it kind of made us think about. So glad to hear. I mean, it's nice to have somebody that bring an RDC, right? So
I would say if an RDC, and I'll just put this out there, for example, an RDC is doing small business plans. That's what the SBDC does. So let's let them do that. Let's us focus on commercial development or something else.
exactly.
Duplication is, we live in Vermont, there's a problem, we create a committee, the committee goes and fixes the problem, the committee doesn't go away. And then we need to keep funding them. And then they go out sometimes and find other things so that they can continue. So it's, I get it.
And several nonprofits jump in too.
Right, yeah.
One of my most productive emails that I can write in my RDC or RDC work is a connection to our area business advisor with the Small Business Development Center.
Right.
And it's like, that's who you need to talk to.
Go.
One more.
Just making a point, do we know the small business development centers are on good ground and good standing at the federal level?
So that would be a Linda Rossi question.
I'm just, it's
Rhetorical question. Got it. Yeah. They do good work.
they do fantastic work, but they're not being well supported.
So glad that you called.
If I have not adequately answered your questions, which I'm not sure I have, happy to come back at any time with more information that would be helpful to you.
Thanks, Commissioner Dan. Thank you.
Just. Yeah, that's fine.
Carolyn.
It's a left one on the right.
I got a right twist.
It's a Brooks.
It's the left one.
Happy buyer too.
But I would never love.
No,
It's,
ask her just to direct us to like, who's an expert on this, so we can.
Sorry, we need, they're right. That's the.
It's missing stuff.
It's
random.
the one that I was trying to.
It is like a water balloon.
Well,
Yeah, where's Jack LaLanne or Richard Simmons to lead us in a quick round of calisthenics?
Got the folder, not only to let them.
It's a lot, so be careful. I need to be very careful about how I stretch it.
I don't get it, I didn't know.
I don't know why.
It seems like circular, it's like
It would just make it more complicated, it's potentially.
Yeah.
we're working on getting 2.2 512 on the website right now. But there's a brand new 2.
Spectacular. How are you?
That's a high bar.
Other than, for some reason, this committee, this space is so confined. No, please, sir, you guys.
What you mean? What you mean? It's like, did we get like,
Yeah,
should it be a little bit
I
deeper?
don't know. I don't know.
I was just sitting here thinking, that's my esteemed colleague Jonathan, now that he's here in person, we have enough room, it's just, because I'm used to sprawling around the corner a little bit.
He's actually used to sitting in your chair.
Wow. Yeah, moving around. It was like the soprano set and everything like 7/8 seconds. It's like Tony LaPorte, like he's bigger than the fridge, you know, like.
Real Bravo too, the classic. Man.
Oh, it's 1.2.
Stuff smaller, so John Wayne.
I didn't do it, do I?
No, you share your screen.
Yes. Yeah, I have it up and ready to go when you are.
okay, why don't we do that and then Eric can get it set up so it's on the posted.
Say go and I'll start.
Ready to roll,
Okay.
still live, so.
For the record, Cameron Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel. What I'm sharing here is draft 2.2 of an amendment to H 512, an act relating to the regulation of the event ticketing market. So draft 2.2, the things that are new from the last time we met are going to be highlighted beginning on the next page. So I'm going to walk through those and just kind of, articulate what's new and kind of our last discussion. When you get to page 2, the definitions are all the same, so I haven't made any changes there. What you have here on page 2 Subsection B is the first addition, which is about a notice requirement. So what you have is a person operating a secondary ticket exchange. This is on line 8. And for reference, the secondary ticket exchange is defined as an electronic marketplace enabling the sale, purchase, and resale of tickets. So this is a person operating a secondary ticket exchange shall provide a statement in a clear and conspicuous manner informing any customer whether the customer is purchasing the ticket from a ticket issuer or a reseller, as the case may be. The reason I phrased it that way is because my understanding is some of these may have contracts with the ticket issuer to potentially sell the original ticket itself. But if that needs to be tweaked, it can be. My understanding is you all wanted the goal of ensuring that the customer knows that they're purchasing a ticket from a reseller in that event. So the secondary ticket exchange has to provide the statement that the customer is purchasing the ticket from a ticket issuer or reseller, and that the resale price of the ticket is limited by subsection C of this section. I included that. Whether or not you all feel that that's necessary, what I was trying to accomplish was the concern about you have the reseller, and then my understanding from testimony you all received from some of these marketplaces, their comment would be, well, we're not the reseller. We're just the online marketplace. And so does the cap apply to the reseller or the exchange, et cetera? Who needs to potentially provide that information? So when I started out drafting the notice, I drafted these two things as two separate pieces. Later on, I added some clarification language about the cap applying to both the reseller and the exchange. So maybe you don't need this B. And I know I'm getting a little bit in the weeds right off the bat here. But I'm just commenting to you all. My understanding was you wanted the A, you wanted the notice that the customer's purchasing the ticket from a reseller. So you have that in A. Whether you think that it's also valuable to have the customer understand the cap or a statement that there is this cap in place, up to you. It's easy to remove if you all would like it removed. Sub 2 here.
Want to go through language?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so, well, maybe this is a sensitive question.
Okay, so the sub 2 is if a secondary ticket exchange provides information about the number or percentage of available tickets for a given event, so that's the condition. If they're going to provide that information, then the information shall be accurate as to the number or percentage of tickets available on that secondary ticket exchange, and shall not mislead customers about the availability of tickets on other platforms. So I was trying my best here to accomplish the goal that you all stated of wanting to ensure that the customers aren't being misled by an exchange saying there's only 4 tickets left for this event, or only 2% of tickets are left for this event, and the person not understanding that maybe only 4 tickets on that particular platform's availability. And so that's what this was intended to try to capture. If you're going to provide that type of information, then it needs to be accurate as to the tickets that are available on your exchange. Madam Vice Chair, you
I'm
look
just
like
not
you
sure
have
it
a
covers what we
question.
wanted it to cover, but let's keep going and we'll
Okay.
see. But
Okay.
I feel like this codifies current practice more than fixes the problem. So
Okay. Happy to brainstorm. Okay, so bottom of page 2, moving to the top of page 3, we have a price cap on secondary ticket exchange. And as I was drafting this, and I didn't make this change, but I wanted to recommend it. It may be worth striking secondary ticket exchange. I think the price cap is intended to apply to others, and I think that was from the bill initially, but that may be just a editing fix you want to make. But when we get into the price cap here on page 3, a ticket reseller shall not charge more than 110% added in the words including taxes and fees. So, wanting to clarify that 110% is the cap of the total cost. So the ticket reseller shall not charge more than 110%, including taxes and fees of the total price of the original ticket, including original taxes and fees. This gets a little wordy. A solution is potentially to add a definition to indicate that the price, the overall price includes taxes and fees, and you can clean it up a little bit. But at the end of the day, the only thing I added in here was including taxes and fees at a recommendation to try to make sure it was clear that the 110% cap has to include taxes and fees as well. You can't charge 110% and then layer on top of that taxes and fees. So then the sub 2 is new. So there was question about whether the ticket reseller in the subdivision 1 would capture this secondary ticket exchange market entity. And so I added this subdivision 2 here, which states that a secondary ticket exchange shall not authorize for sale on the exchange a ticket valued at greater than 110%, same language. So an individual can't resell the ticket. So I can't go to you and just resell you an original ticket at greater than the 110%. And then if I'm going to sell that ticket on some sort of marketplace, some sort of electronic exchange, I think you all heard from StubHub. We'll use them as the example because they testified. That exchange itself cannot allow individuals to sell tickets at greater than 110% on their exchange marketplace. Okay. That is the subdivision 2 is the new, subdivision 1 was there. And then sub 3 is new as well. This subsection shall not apply to the resale of a ticket if the reseller has contracted with the ticket issuer for the resale of tickets at a price greater than 110% of the total price of the original ticket.
I just want to come back to 2 for a second. So how are they going to verify? I mean, what's to stop me from going on StubHub? Maybe I paid $30 for a ticket and say, I paid $150 for this ticket.
What I've seen in other states, what's not here is the original tickets are required to have the original ticket value printed on them. I don't know if that is a standard in the marketplace, but StubHub should be able to validate what the original ticket price was. But I think it's a question and they would need to answer. They would, based on this language, they would have to validate whomever that secondary ticket exchange is. But keep in mind, the reseller has to validate that as well. So a reseller, regardless of whether you're doing it through the marketplace or just doing it individual to individual, the ticket reseller would have to validate what the original price of the ticket was if they're going to resell. Okay. Then you have the subsection D here, which is the ban on deceptive URLs and improper use of intellectual property. All that I've changed is, if you recall, there was that question or confusion about whether or not you could use the venue's name or the artist's name in, certain aspects of the URL or indications on the website. And there was some questions about, well, then how do you even inform the public what venue the place is at or what artist the place is at based on that prohibition. So I pulled up Maine's language last time, which I thought was much more simplistic, but still trying to accomplish the same goal, and gave a little bit more flexibility for the AG's office, for example, if they wanted to, engage with a reseller about their practices. So it's just that a reseller or a secondary ticket exchange cannot use deceptive website addresses or imply endorsement or ownership of any intellectual property or artist of the venue or artist without explicit written authorization. And then the rest of this is the same. the prohibition cannot sell speculative tickets. That applies to a reseller, not a secondary ticket exchange, because of the question that you were just raising. I think it would be significantly more challenging or difficult for an entity like StubHub to validate an individual isn't trying to sell a speculative ticket. You can add them, obviously, if you want them to ensure and be held to that, but I'm just giving you information, the distinction between the selling and the cap on the price, which the secondary ticket exchange could not authorize sale over that cap, versus here, this piece only applies to the reseller as an individual or person themselves. And then what was removed was the registration requirement, the bond requirement, the educational requirement that was in a section by itself. Those pieces have been removed. And then the effective date became 2026. It was 2027 based on the fact of registration for all of those entities with the Secretary of State, et cetera. Try to give them a little bit more of a runway to get that registration process up. Here, I moved it to 2026. Happy to move it back to 2027 if you all would prefer.
Questions for Cameron? Okay. Questions, sir?
I have a question about policy elements, but not.
First, Susan? What?
It's still spectacular. No question.
I'm gonna join the Zoom and share a few slides, I think. Thanks for having me back again on this. I'm Susan Evans McClure, Executive Director of the Vermont Arts Council. I wanted to start with a few examples, which I will do on this Zoom. I think. This is the. All right, great. I pulled some more examples to share with all of you. Well, first of all, I'll say thank you again for addressing this important issue to Vermonters and to the arts community and to the arts organizations that are supporting our local economy. I wanted to share just a few more examples with you. In case any of us were thinking that maybe this issue has been fixed in all the time that we've been talking about it here. I pulled just a range of examples from nationally known artists to smaller, more niche opportunities that are happening in Vermont, just to give you a sense of the scale of what we're dealing with this week. So this concert is from a nationally known band called Lake Street Dive. They're playing at Shelburne Museum this summer. Highly recommend, they're incredible. The Higher Ground is, not that you came here for my music criticism, but Higher Ground is putting on the show. Tickets are for sale and still available on the Higher Ground website for $79. On StubHub, those tickets are going for $126 to $1,035. This was yesterday. So that's a nationally known band. There's also an event at the Paramount coming up, Dirty Dancing in Concert. Very different, also sounds fun. Exactly. That's coming up. We were wondering if they were going to do the lift in the halls of the theater, but so that's coming up on March 1st. You can buy your tickets at the Paramount, $45 or $55, depending on where you want to sit, for full view of the screen. Those tickets are available on StubHub right now from $94 to $103. The Flynn is hosting an event called Let's Sing Together, a live band tribute to Taylor Swift on March 5th. You can buy those tickets from $50 to $60, and tickets are for sale on Vivid Seats from $79 to $86 for that event right now. We talked last week about the Noah Kahan tour that was just announced last week. Those tickets at Fenway are for the 4 shows that are happening at Fenway for Vermont's own Noah Kahan. Those are all fully sold out. The website specifies tickets for these shows are non-transferable. So that means that you cannot they're in your name. You can't just sell them to somebody else and give them to somebody else.
going to StubHub this morning, StubHub this morning, those tickets are for sale from anywhere from $500 to well over $1,000, using phrases like only 2 left and amazing price. We actually emailed the Red Sox ticket office to ask how this would work, because frankly, there are many Noah Khan fans among us who are just confused. If the tickets are not transferable, how is this going to work? Red Sox Ticket Services replied to us in an email, and I'm just going to read what they said. They said, tickets for the upcoming Noah Khan performances are designated as non-transferable. Because of this restriction, tickets cannot be transferred from one account to another. As a result, we are not able to confirm how third-party sellers intend to deliver tickets to buyers when they are listed on resale marketplaces. Tickets acquired outside of authorized platforms, Boston Red Sox or Live Nation, are done so at the buyer's own risk, and we cannot guarantee their validity or provide assistance with delivery issues that may arise. So that was from the venue where it is taking place. I also wanted to, so those are some examples of the resale issues that are happening. We also were able to work with the folks you heard from last week at the National Independent Talent Organization. You heard from Nathaniel Morrow, who happens to be both their executive director and a Vermonter and a musician. He was able to access some information about a concert that happened in 2023 in Vermont. The band was called Billy Strings. They were playing at the Champlain Valley Fairgrounds. What he found is that 493 tickets, with the information he could access, 493 tickets were resold. The average price of them were $55. The average resale price was $188. That means that for these shows, Vermont fans were spending over $65,000 more than they should have, and that money is going to the resellers and not to the venue and not to the artists. And they're not keeping that money to spend in our local economies. The numbers that NITO has access to here cover about 60% of StubHub's data, so they don't actually take into account other sales on SeatGeek, Vivid Seats, and other platforms. So the numbers are most likely much higher than this. So I think it says something that every time, and I'll take this off so you can, here we go. I think this says something that every time you've had me here in this seat, I've been able to find more and different examples of how this predatory resale practice is really hurting Vermonters and Vermont's economy. So we are fully in support of the changes proposed to H512. And while we, of course, believe that ending the deceptive practices online will have a meaningful impact, you've heard from me before, and I'll restate that really the price cap on resale is by far the most impactful piece of this legislation. Instituting price caps will put guardrails on an unregulated market that's hurting Vermont consumers. It'll put us in line with our colleagues in Maine and with many countries around the world, including Ireland and the UK. It will protect the small Vermont venues who are working hard every day to bring joy and connection to through the arts to our towns across the state. It will protect consumers and their hard-earned money. And the thoughtful and careful language that you've added into the bill here ensures that Vermont consumers can still resell their tickets in transparent, safe online markets. So when you make it illegal to resell a ticket for a grossly inflated price, you remove the incentive for bad actors to scam Vermonters. And while no bill can end all of the bad practices of the internet, we do know from colleagues in Maine and across the world that price caps really work in this market. Effective use of price caps means that our state government will be working at what I think is its highest and best use, protecting Vermonters, supporting our local economy, and creating a fair playing field for commerce to thrive for everyone. So thank you for your belief in the power of this important legislation that really will help drive our economy and bring our communities together and support the artists and venues who are the lifeblood of Vermont's arts ecosystem. Happy to answer questions.
Questions for Susan? Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Delos from the Attorney General's office. Not a lot to add to what Susan just said. We support the amendment as Ledge Council just walked through. Think it's moving in an important direction and continue to support this legislative initiative.
Questions for Tom? Kurt?
Yeah, so there was this discussion at one point about whether or not you could, in the disclosure part of the bill, you could say, and here's how you could find out the price of the regional ticket. And there's I heard some concerns about that. but I'm still interested in it because it's potential alternative to price caps. But if it's not really an alternative because of legal problems, that would steer me towards, the price cap.
Yeah, and apologies that I didn't do a deeper dive since we spoke on this last, but I essentially, in the consumer protection space, consumer law, as it interacts with the First Amendment, largely focuses on the fact that there is no First Amendment protection for deceptive speech, right? We don't protect lies in the consumer marketplace. And that's why requiring disclosures, clear and conspicuous language tends to pass muster. Where greater challenges can occur is when we are asking businesses to affirmatively share information about their competitors. And that can be a much more challenging legal position to take, because essentially you're mandating some degree, to put it grossly, of advertising of a competitor's site. Our position is we support what the Arts Council has put forward in terms of the price cap being the most protective and easiest measure for consumers. And we think the disclosure language that's now laid out mirrors other required disclosures and will also help that consumer information piece. And of course, the piece that's no longer in the bill, but is very much part of the work, is continued consumer education with the arts community. Our consumer assistance project, really a program helping consumers understand when you go buy tickets, here are the things you want to look for.
So translating that for me, trying to make a decision here, to me, that means that if you're concerned about predatory pricing, we got a competitive market, let's go free market. But if you got predatory pricing kind of situations, probably not free market. Yeah. So, but if you don't have an alternative to try to show the consumer what the original price is, you're sort of backed into, okay, a cap, fair cap, but a cap.
And I think as you've heard testimony in the past, this was the case across the country. Maybe 25, 30 years ago, there were price caps on all of this. So it is a practice that's existed here before.
We cap prices or set prices in all sorts of situations where you might have a monopoly, or consumers don't really have good information about what their choices are. So there are lots of reasons why you might want to impose some sort of regulation of the price in order to protect consumers who otherwise aren't.
And I'd say that, one other area where we weighed in on were the rent-a-centers. We made significant changes to that law. And we did put caps in there too.
Todd, Mr. Clear's testimony included an unusual response from a major entity like the Boston Red Sox ticket office saying, we don't know. And it makes me wonder, well, what does Live Nation know about what a ticket is? And are we talking then about, are we getting into a slippery area of what a resale is, or what transferability is, or who owns the thing? And I'm just a little bit, I'm wondering to what extent that may become a conversation that will be happening in some of our venues, but not all of them.
Yeah, it's a fascinating scenario. I don't think, reflecting on it fairly briefly, and therefore my answer will be fairly superficial, that non-transferability piece could be considered deceptive practice if the entity that was selling the non-transferable item was aware that it was non-transferable and was still selling it. But generally, I think that becomes a matter for the individual consumer as they purchase it, and not within the purview of 512. That one specific piece, I think there is a question, it's raised sort of what is appropriate to determine the original value of a ticket. I think, it's going to be what are the reasonable steps in the marketplace around that. And certainly from our enforcement perspective, we'll be looking at what's a reasonable you know, if somebody is out and out lying, it's not necessarily a case that we would take against the platform versus the individual who's fraudulently trying to inflate the original value of the ticket to inflate their, you know, that's the bad actor in that scenario. But there still should be some reasonable checks by the platform to ensure they're not just allowing, turning a blind eye.
And my secondary element or other question that I had to do with that consumer education piece that you were describing. It seems like if there were a price cap in place in a state, then consumers would have that seems too high. And once that is known, any sort of number above blah seems like that couldn't possibly be the case because of this price cap. And I'm wondering, for me, the nexus of the bill protecting venues was clearer at the outset. And it seems like it's less about that now and more about limiting how much a thing is worth. And I am wondering if that is where the one, like, is there still, where do the venues go? And are they still, where's the counterfeit websites and stuff like that? Are they in this amendment or anything? Are they still protected? Or is it all sort of, is the only protective element that we have in this bill a price cap?
I think, so there's the language that Cameron laid out and simplified. I don't actually have it in front of me, but
it's a ban on deceptive URLs.
Yeah, right. So that already exists. We already have authority. We would consider those deceptive practices independent of this law, but this law certainly provides a much more directive statute to rely upon as opposed to the broader CPA, the broader Consumer Protection Act. Then there's the language around unlicensed use of intellectual property. That I think is meant to protect images of the Flynn on flynnvttix.cm or whatever a fraudulent site might be. And again, you know, if they were advertising the Noah Kahan concert or what have you, and they're not the authorized dealer, that again is a very straightforward deceptive act. So I think those all defend and protect both the venue and the performer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm going back to that sentence, that paragraph that Cameron and I were talking about before about the secondary ticket exchange. So if we said instead, secondary ticket exchange provides information about if the secondary ticket exchange provides information about the number or percentage of available tickets for a given event, the information shall not mislead customers about the availability of tickets on that platform or on other platforms. Is that defendable? I mean, I'm hoping this is not something that we will have an issue with, because capping the price reduces the incentive for hyping up a ticket that is a very high price to be sold quickly, right? And that's what these 3 tickets left, 2% of the tickets available, right? That's what that does. It's hyping up the ability, somebody's desire to buy a ticket quickly. So part of me is like, we can strike the whole paragraph, and part of me is like, how do we clarify that so that it's.
Yeah, I mean, I think, how do you go after the generated sense of urgency that drives someone to make, right? I mean, that's a scam. That's an immemorial scam technique. It's definitely deceptive. I think the language as I heard it, and I'm not a great oral processor, but is broad enough to cover the waterfront here. I mean, and I would leave it maybe for a conversation with Cameron, but you're either having this very focused, like you cannot use number or percentage, which is I would think, I'm not as versed in this as maybe Susan is, like what the sites are saying to kind of drive that urgency. More broad language about deceit, you know, we'll still act on that. But I think you could end up for the sector, it may be helpful to have this kind of additional clarity, unless you feel like it's too narrow to measure up to. Yeah, I can't, I'm just not thinking of other ones.
Because as tickets sell, it's really hard to be accurate on what percentage of tickets are still available. And so, but not misleading, I think, is the.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll.
As I hear it, I wouldn't have a problem with that change from our perspective, from an enforcement perspective.
Questions for Todd? Great. Thank you, Todd. David?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for taking the time and seeing everyone again. Maybe touch base on a couple of things here. When I testified, 10 days ago, we talked a lot about disclosures. I'll note that we have been looking at potential solutions to that internally since we've spoken. And, part of that process is not just what we're going to do, but how would we comply both from our app and website and things of that nature, right, to address some of the concerns. So I just say those are actively ongoing to see what we can do to address some of those concerns, continue to be willing to work with the committee. I just saw the language for the first time, so I'm hesitant to kind of do a deep dive on that. I'd want to kind of digest it, but just wanted to note that on the front end. Couple things maybe on price caps. I don't want to be repetitive, and then maybe we can get to Noah Kahan as well, so that way we just address things that have been discussed, and happy to take questions. On price caps, again, the concern in summary is you go from a regulated market to an unregulated market, right? You're not changing the market when you put those in. And so the consumer harm goes up. I know there was just reference to Ireland. Interestingly enough, we use Ireland as the perfect example of the harm of price caps. So that went in 2021, and there was a serious problem with ticket fraud, even going into 2024. The Irish police, the Bank of Ireland, Revolut, which is kind of like a Venmo, all issued kind of separate warnings about increased incidents of ticket scams leading up to large events because of the price caps. And we've seen that not only in Ireland, but in other places as well, which is why, there's so few states that have it. Again, as it relates to Maine, the Maine bill, whether is not necessarily a price cap. I mean, there's a lot of confusion around what that was and where the AG stands on it today, as far as if it is or is not a price cap. The other thing, and I know this just came up and I heard the question, how do we validate? That's exactly the challenge with this, right? It is difficult compliance as well, because StubHub or any other platform doesn't have access to how much was paid for the ticket. So we'd essentially be looking to do one of two things: either check with the consumer or somehow talk about that open distribution that we discussed in the past, so that we could go in there and validate it through technology. So those, both the consumer harm and the lack of and the enforcement challenges, I think, are our opposition. As it relates to Noah Kahan, couple things there. I know there was reference to tickets being available on our website before the general on sale, and that those tickets didn't exist. This becomes the challenge with the industry and how the primary ticket works. One, I'd point to two studies federally with the Government Accountability Office. Secondly, the state of New York, that shows that anywhere between, when you get to the general on sale, anywhere between 10 and 45, 50% of the tickets have already been sold, right? So they are in the marketplace. Specifically with Noah Kahan, for example, the general on sale was on February 12th. There was an artist pre-sale on February 10th, where 50,000 people had access to try to get tickets for that. Even before that, when you look at the concert that was set for Wrigley Field in Chicago, all season ticket holders for the Chicago Cubs had the ability to get up to 6 tickets on February 9th. And so that's just one show, one example. That doesn't include the sponsors, the credit card holders, because they have the right credit card, all of that nature. And so there's a large number of tickets that are available in the market, so to speak, prior to on sale, and that is widely the case. So I just wanted to kind of note that. On transfer, the rules here can be confusing, no doubt. One, I just note that tickets purchased on our site, as I've mentioned, are backed by our Fan Protect guarantee, right? So you'll get a valid ticket in time for the event, or we'll make it right. A lot of times what we see with this is that tickets are non-transferable at the start, and then the artist opens it up and they become transferable 48 or 72 hours before the event. So it's normal for delivery to happen just closer to the event. That being said, this is the challenge, right? We think that the consumer should have options and should have choice and shouldn't be forced into the Ticketmaster ecosystem, and who controls the artists, the promoters, the venues, the primary ticketing, and now wants to control the secondary market because that's where there's competition. And it's because of this attempt to restrict transfer, which is why more states have passed laws to open transfer than have tried to cap prices, right? That's the consumer benefit here more than capping prices. And so I think that addresses kind of a lot of what's been discussed. I know we've talked already at length. Happy to kind of take questions, but I thought that was some of the things that may be new or relevant since we last spoke.
Thank you, David. Edie?
I'm just curious, what responsibility or use that word, does StubHub have for tickets that are sold on your platform where there's no resale allowed, where the transfer is not allowed? So what is StubHub's responsibility? What's the word I'm missing?
Yeah, what I'd say is we comply with all state and federal laws, right? And again, I'd go back to the fact that these tickets—
Liability, that's the word I'm looking for. What's the liability that StubHub has for selling a ticket on your website that is not transferable?
But again, I just note that a lot of these tickets do become transferable, right? And we back it with our Fan Protect guarantee, right? And so we get people through the door, and we do it legally, and we work with the seller to do that.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks for talking to us again. The last time we spoke, there was this issue around the price cap, not so much as a means to address predatory pricing, but rather the amount of the cap itself. And there were some inquiries about so what are the expense components, I think, of your price, resale price? In other words, expense items, as opposed to, say, profit margin or something like that. And because that goes into whether or not the 10% cap is reasonable, right?
Right.
I would just, that would be information that I would find helpful, because it goes to whether or not the level of the price cap is reasonable.
Yeah, I guess, again, as it relates to the price cap and what the are you trying to address capping profits or capping revenue by that? Or because what we would say is the challenge with the price cap, again, going back to it, is the consumer harm first, because it leads to bigger fraud, and the lack of enforceability and ability to validate.
And I understand your position on the price cap. Any sort of entity that tries to get into some sort of regulatory setting, utilities, whatever, some sort of regulatory agency what they're trying to figure out, because it's a non-competitive situation or there's predatory kinds of issues, they always try to figure out, well, if you can regulate a price, you got to make sure it's reasonable, right? So they break it apart in terms of, a reasonable profit and then the items of expense. So that's what I was hoping to get a little bit of a flavor from.
I have not seen anything like that we've done. Again, price caps aren't
Okay.
widely, we don't have them generally as a general rule in the US. So it's not like we've had to comply, but let me look more into that. But I haven't seen a itemization in that way for prices.
Yeah, I mean, I would think the expense items would be constant no matter if it's 10% over the original price or 300% over the expense components would be the same. It's just the amount of profit, wouldn't it be?
The expenses overall, right? So I say that like our 24/7 customer service, our fan protect guarantee, those things are the cost of data security, right? Again, of credit card information being exchanged. The percent might be different on a ticket that's $6 versus 600, right? The costs are constant. It's not every ticket sold, 5% of it is expenses, right? It could be.
I think there are probably ways to allocate,
Yeah.
those expensive, but that's fine. I think I understand where you come from.
The questions? Okay. Two on the floor. I don't think we're gonna get to this to vote today. I think we may stay a little longer on Friday. We had 385 to go through, our budget letter, 385. Maybe at 3 o'clock, we take this up and finish it. So with that, thank you, everyone. David, thank you for joining us again.
Thank you.
And so tomorrow morning, committee, 9 o'clock. We're on the floor all morning tomorrow. So 9 o'clock, caucus of the whole, state of the guard presentation. Trustees, any new adjutant general? We're back here at 1 on page 205. See if we can actually move that. And then continue some discussions on the FY25 budget with UVM. It will be Wendy Koenig that will be in. We'll hear from DPAC and from the chancellor, the Vermont State. And then when we finish the floor tomorrow, we're going to try to see if we can move H639 after the floor. So with that, we can go offline.